In the ancient land of Magadha, the Buddha was leading his monastic disciples on a journey from the bustling city of Rajagaha toward the northern city of Nalanda. The path wound through mountains and green fields, and everyone walked in calm silence, reflecting an inner sense of serenity. Not far behind them, however, there was a teacher and disciple pair from another spiritual tradition, traveling along the same road. This teacher, whose name was Shubei, was a stubborn ascetic who loved to argue. As they walked, he kept criticizing the Buddha, belittling his teachings, and even mocking the Buddha's disciples without any restraint. By contrast, his disciple, whose name was Fantamona, had deep admiration for the Buddha. Fantamona spoke repeatedly about the Buddha's wisdom and compassion, doing his best to defend him. "Master," Fantamona said earnestly, "the Buddha's teaching can free people from suffering. This kind of wisdom is extremely rare in this world. How can you dismiss it so lightly?" Shubei scoffed in return. "Fantamona, you're far too naive. There's no real path to transcendence, just tricks that the foolish use to deceive themselves. Don't be taken in." All along the way, their heated debate rose and fell in volume, carrying a strong note of discord that soon caught the attention of the Buddha's disciples walking ahead. Wondering at the odd behavior of this teacher and disciple duo, some of the monks murmured among themselves, "That pair is so strange. The master is constantly attacking the Buddha, while the student keeps praising him. If they're so divided, how can they have any unity in practice?" They spoke quietly among themselves, feeling grateful for the Buddha's guidance, which had always helped his disciples stay united in both purpose and cooperation. By nightfall, the travelers arrived at a resting place called the Garden of Ambala Trees, a spot filled with lush greenery. Within the garden stood a large public shelter where travelers could spend the night. The Buddha and his disciples settled in quietly, preparing to rest. Meanwhile, the dispute between Shubei and Fantamona continued. Their voices echoed in the night, one full of criticism, the other full of praise, making the monks even more puzzled. The Buddha observed it all. He sensed his disciples' confusion and noticed the conflict between Shubei and Fantamona. With a peaceful smile, he entered the main hall where the disciples had gathered, his gaze gentle yet filled with deep insight. He asked, "Monks, I noticed you were talking among yourselves. What were you discussing?" Standing respectfully, they explained what they had heard and shared their own thoughts. The Buddha listened quietly, and once they finished speaking, he began to address them in a clear, calm voice. "Monks, when you hear people speak badly of the Tathagata, the teachings, or the monastic community, do not be troubled or saddened. Anger and resentment only cloud the mind and prevent clear understanding of what is true or false in another person's words. If you let those emotions rule you and begin to fight back, you only increase your own agitation." Everyone fell silent, reflecting on how they had reacted. The Buddha went on, "Likewise, when you hear praise for the Tathagata, for the teachings, or for the community, do not let it fill your heart with pride or excitement. If you become swept up in people's compliments, you may not see clearly whether their praise actually holds true." Some of the monks seemed touched by these words, but there were also those who looked uncertain. One asked, "Master, it's human nature to feel anger when insulted and joy when praised. Why should we remain above these reactions?" The Buddha smiled gently, his eyes calm as still water. "People are usually governed by their emotions and by external circumstances. But those who seek the spiritual path cannot discover the truth if their minds remain unsettled. Whether others criticize or praise, those are simply external voices. Your real task is to look honestly at the source of those words and see whether they align with correct understanding. Only when you rise above emotional turbulence can you see the true nature of things." Gradually, the monks began to grasp his teaching. They recalled their own feelings towards Shubei and Fantamona and felt a sense of remorse. Another disciple asked, "Master, how should we regard other people's criticism and praise in a way that's correct?" With a compassionate look, the Buddha answered, "If someone criticizes you, remain calm and examine whether what they say is true. If it isn't, there's no need to be angry, but if it's accurate, take it as a reminder to improve yourself." The same applies to praise. If someone's praise is warranted, receive it with gratitude without becoming proud. If their words don't reflect reality, then don't let it flatter you. Following this approach, you can keep your mind steady in the face of both criticism and praise. The hall grew quiet. The monks felt profoundly moved. They realized their emotional swings were rooted in their own attachments, rather than anything external. The Buddha continued, "Monks, the path of practice begins with observing the mind, not chasing the external world. If your heart is always moved by outside events, you'll be like leaves blown around in the wind, lacking any firm foundation. A true practitioner should be like a tree firmly rooted in the earth, remaining steady and tranquil no matter how hard it storms." The disciples bowed deeply, grateful for his teaching. They understood that practice does not simply mean withdrawing from the world's commotion. It means tempering the mind with wisdom and calmness in the midst of everyday challenges. The Buddha's advice on responding to criticism and praise made them appreciate even more the essence of his message. But the Buddha had more to share. He continued, "Monks, I want to tell you something else. Ordinary people often offer shallow or surface-level praise of the Tathagata. While their admiration has value, it doesn't necessarily touch on what's most essential. They do not yet see why the Tathagata is truly worthy of praise." The monks grew alert and curious. One of them asked, "Master, if worldly praise doesn't delve deep enough, then what kind of praise really does the Tathagata justice?" With unwavering calm, the Buddha explained, "Many people admire the Tathagata for living a life of pure discipline, observing basic moral guidelines, eating simple meals, living modestly, and not storing up possessions. While such conduct reflects moral integrity, it is still only the surface. It does not reach into the heart of what the Tathagata has truly achieved. Praising the Tathagata only for moral conduct is an ordinary way of looking at it and doesn't capture the real depth of the Tathagata's wisdom and enlightenment." The disciples bowed their heads, pondering his words. One asked, "Master, then, what is it about the Tathagata that deserves our deepest admiration?" The Buddha nodded gently, as if he had been waiting for that question. Genuine praise should recognize the profound and radiant insight the Tathagata has realized. This wisdom isn't about external discipline. It's about seeing reality as it truly is. Countless practitioners in the world are entangled in distorted beliefs. Some are attached to the idea of permanence. Some drift into denial. Some cling to partial theories about whether the world has an end or not. All these beliefs are like a vast fishing net that ensnares those who fall into it. He paused and gazed at the monks with great compassion. The Tathagata has gone beyond these misconceptions. He has seen into the truth of all phenomena. By carefully examining the senses and their objects, the Tathagata understands that feelings arise through specific causes and conditions, and it is craving and clinging that bring about suffering. Driven by desire, people become attached to the world. When that world inevitably changes, they experience distress. A wise person discerns both the arising and ceasing of these causes, and thus transcends the cycle, fully liberating themselves. He offered an analogy, his voice carrying a gentle power. "Monks, this complete liberation is like cutting a tree at its roots. Once the roots are severed, no matter how many branches or leaves it has, it will eventually wither and cannot grow again. In the same way, a wise one cuts off the core of craving and attachment that propels rebirth, bringing the flow of existence to an end." This is the Tathagata's profound, luminous insight. Hearing this, the monks were filled with deep reverence. They now realized the Buddha's greatness was not only in his disciplined life, but more importantly, in his clarity about suffering's origin and his freedom from it. Inspired by his words, they felt their practice goals become even clearer, like bright lamps lighting their way. The Buddha then said, "So monks, if you truly want to extol the Tathagata, remember that the value of his teaching is not just about external behavior. It's about guiding living beings to understand the causes of their experiences, break the bonds of craving, and ultimately uproot afflictions. That is where the real wisdom lies, and that is what makes the Tathagata truly worthy of praise." His words flowed like a cool stream that soothed and awakened the hearts of everyone there. As the monks quietly reflected, the Buddha continued to help them turn these ideas into deeper understanding. Monks, people often stop at superficial admiration because they're drawn to what they can see: moral conduct, simplicity of lifestyle, or other outward signs. But those are only the first steps. The true heart of this path is not the discipline itself, but how discipline lays the foundation for right understanding and liberation. Discipline is like a sturdy bridge. It helps you cross over to freedom, yet there's no point in just standing on the bridge and marveling at its structure. The monks felt enlightened by this analogy, realizing that while discipline is crucial, it is meant to open the way to wisdom. Without wisdom, one could follow forms and rules endlessly without ever touching the genuine core of the path. The Buddha went on, monks, the same principle applies to deep meditation. Without correct understanding, meditation may lead to extraordinary internal experiences that can mislead the practitioner. Some develop the ability to recall countless past lives and then assume the world is eternal. This kind of attachment to permanence arises because their meditation lacked the guidance of right insight. If meditation is a sharp blade, in the hands of right understanding, it can remove the roots of suffering, but in the hands of false views, it can cause harm. The disciples nodded, aware of the responsibility that comes with proper practice. Without right understanding, any method, even an advanced one, might lead to confusion or deviation from the authentic path. The Buddha then shifted his focus. Monks, the real value of these teachings is not measured by how many people follow them or how grand the temples appear. Even if millions were to believe in the Buddha's word, if they fail to grasp its essence and fail to live by it, all that external show would be empty. On the other hand, even if only a few people truly comprehend the core teachings, the true meaning of these teachings will endure. The monks reflected deeply, recognizing that the life force of the teachings depends on the transmission of its essential wisdom, rather than mere external growth. The Buddha's message felt like a mirror, showing them what truly matters in both the present and the future. He concluded, monks, whether you are practicing or sharing these teachings with others, your main task is to ensure that the central wisdom of the teachings is fully understood. This wisdom is not about self-centered knowledge or emotional fixation. It's about seeing causes and conditions for what they are, and going beyond the cycle of rebirth. A true practitioner seeks to move beyond the causes of affliction, understanding action, and result in order to find liberation. Only then do these teachings genuinely benefit people, helping them discover the light in their own hearts. A serene hush fell over the gathering. The disciples bowed their heads, absorbing his words. They realized they were both beneficiaries and messengers of the Buddha's profound and radiant insight that reveals the world's deepest truths. This evening's teaching resolved the questions that had surfaced in their minds and also opened up new avenues for reflection on their path. They saw with fresh clarity that genuine practice doesn't mean blindly following external customs. It means rooting out ignorance through direct insight. In doing so, they would illuminate their own lives and those of others as well, fulfilling the essence of the Buddha's message.